Mike Owens and Inside Fighting here, and it's always a pleasure to be joined by Brian Campbell, one half of the award-winning Morning Combat. Brian, always a pleasure, my man. How are things with you today?
Yeah. Yes, happy holidays to you and yours over there in Liverpool, Mike Owens Media. Always gets me fired up to talk to you. I mean, what a year we had in combat sports, right? Maybe a little bit,
100%.
kind of. Yeah,
Where,
all
where,
right.
where do I rank on your Scouse Power rankings? Have you got Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann, Darren Till? Where am I somewhere in between?
I think I'd go number one on there. All right. All right. Those Scousers are notorious, but you represent them well. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. We are obviously coming off a fantastic final UFC pay-per-view of the year, UFC 310. What was your biggest takeaway storyline moment from the
Yeah,
the
I,
Las
I
Vegas card?
wonder I wonder how much of my biggest takeaway slash storyline has been altered at all by Daniel Cormier's reveal that Shavkat Rakhmonov had a torn MCL coming in.
Mm,
But I think, look, all of these fighters are hurt in some form, and if you
mm,
agree to take the fight, you agree to take the fight. And the story here was Ian Machado, Gary. And I'm not, suddenly an overnight, Gary super fan, but how could you not respect the way he acted? To steal the phrase from Teddy Atlas, he behaved like a fighter in
mm.
accepting the fight on 3 weeks' notice and not being afraid to go in there against the boogeyman. And, it turns out he certainly benefited from the time they had together a little bit more than 2 years ago as sparring partners at Killcliff FC. But to see the poise, and no, look, Ian didn't win the fight. I didn't have him winning it. I don't even think there's an argument in a clear 3 rounds to 2 setup that he won the fight. So, people have criticized me already of saying, we're giving out participation trophies. What is this? Edgar Berlanga doing the world tour after he
Victory
got
tour.
shut out by Canelo?
Mm,
No, I think this is different because of the class of opponent he was going against and because we hadn't seen Ian on this level. He had a great run to get to this point, but each of those step up fights and wins, we had just as many questions than we did answers about who he is. To see him show so much of a veteran poise to go in there, execute his game plan, minimize the danger, and then be the fresher fighter going for the big finish late in the final round. I think that's as close to a moral victory as you'll find in this sport. And then it announces another absolutely legitimate title contender. And, sometimes we can get caught up in the soap opera of these fighters' lives outside the cage. And
mm,
Ian's certainly been caught up in more than a few saucy situations,
mm,
whether they're contrived by his enemies or not. But it was really good to see the kid stand firm,
mm.
announce who he is, and I don't know what else you want to say about him out there. He says, "Look, I didn't lose in my eyes. I lost by opinion," and I think that's certainly true if you're saying opinion is the judge's scorecards. But he was a very big winner on this night, and it's funny that Shavkat won the fight. He's going to be fighting next for the world title. Yet sometimes in this sport, you can be the story when you're not even in the main event. You didn't
Mm.
even win the fight. It's rare, but it happens.
I suppose that brings me on to my next question, and I asked this next one obviously with an asterisk based upon the information we have about a potential Shavkat injury. Did Shavkat stock fall more than Ian Gary's rose? So which one do you
Ooh,
think
that's a
changed?
very smart question there, Mike. I appreciate that. Did it? I don't think it. No, I don't think it fell as much as Ian's rose. First of all, Shavkat won the fight. There's no controversy here. He didn't get, knocked down. I mean, he was, I guess you could say, almost submitted twice in that sequence in round 5, but there was almost a lack of panic, for better or worse, on Shavkat, and that's certainly his style. He almost has a smile on his face as he walks people down and treats them like prey, as if he's literally out hunting. Did he come back down to earth from this performance? Absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, when you finish 18 consecutive fighters and get the fanfare that he has, that's natural. I think for his sake and his reputation, the reveal of the injury certainly helps. And you got to add in this fact: whether people are actually keeping score in the court of public opinion on this or not, it's not Shavkat talking about the injury. He's not leaning on it as an
100%.
excuse. He's not
Yeah.
even mentioning that it really is there or happened. Obviously, the concern we might have is how quickly can he come back and can we make this Bilal Muhammad fight next? Because not only did he earn it again, right, by beating Ian Gary, he had already earned it.
Yeah.
But this could end up being one of those things that helps him out, meaning in the long run, because it's lowering everybody's expectations. We've seen, he's human, I mean, he
Mhm.
wasn't bleeding in this fight, but it's like that moment in Rocky Four when Drago starts bleeding and like
Yeah.
everybody stops. It's like, oh, the
Yeah.
Russian is bleeding. In this case, the Kazakh warrior, you're going to see those betting lines a lot closer than you would have heading into his shot at the title against Bilal Muhammad. But as long as he's able to get healthy when that title fight takes place, he has, in my opinion, just the same ability as he had before to potentially come in there and do something amazing. And probably, to be fair, probably should be slightly favored given the recent track history. And that's not a shot at Bilal Muhammad, who, all he does is win while everyone else counts him out. But um, he didn't take a loss. He didn't have any kind of major setback in there. So Shavkat will be back. He's in prime position to continue his course. But yeah, anytime somebody is blowing through people at such a violent and efficient pace, and then you watch them struggle, I mean, look, there are things to pick apart for Shavkat, whether it was injury induced or not. At times it looked like there was almost a failure to launch because he was so surprised that Ian Gary was doing so well at cutting the corners and really kind of closing the strike zone of what was available to Shavkat. But Shavkat has unnatural patience and always has, and poise. He figured out how to win that fight, and I think he'll be fine moving forward.
And talking about moving forward, that brings us on to the final UFC event of the year, which is Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley in the main event of UFC Tampa. Such a fascinating fight in terms of where both guys are at. So many questions around Buckley, so many questions around Colby. Give me your early read on this fight because I find it such an interesting one.
I mean, it's definitely one of those on paper, and it's a surprise matchup because it wasn't originally scheduled, where you're like, wow, crazy style contrast, crazy personality contrast, crazy contrast in just about everything. But I feel we have to be realistic about where Colby Covington's at, how dangerous he actually is, and how much longer we're going to see him at this level. Is he going to be the guy because he's getting closer to this position to have to be the old gatekeeper for the guys on the way up? Is that going to be something that keeps him around? I'm not really sure of that. I think this was a smart, calculated move on his regard because Buckley, for as explosive and fun as this win streak has been, certainly isn't a perfect fighter, and we're still sort of waiting for that monster elite breakout moment, even though the steps he's taken to get here, all you can do is stand up and applaud, right? He's done what he's had to do to get here. But I look at this as not just, Buckley's fight to lose. In some ways, I struggle to see over 5 rounds how Colby would get his hand raised. I get the style contrast. I get what he does great with the wrestling and, more importantly, using that cardio as a weapon. But this is a Colby into his late 30s who has not been active, who has not been scoring big breakthrough wins over ranked fighters, has been lingering in that sort of celebrity title challenger area. I mean, kudos to him for the Masvidal pay-per-view. He got the win. He's been alternating wins and losses. But even with the threat he can bring to mute some of the things that Buckley does well, Buckley's a dog. He's figured out how to have great cardio. This is obviously a 5-round close-up opportunity, but this is Buckley's chance to pass the test and finally be for real in that title discussion. He was a dark horse title challenger coming into this fight, meaning if he would have gotten the call, if everything aligned, you wouldn't have hated the opportunity. But this is a perfect test against a veteran 2-time former title challenger for him to go in there and show us that style of Colby not going to work anymore at this age, not going to be as effective. For as much as a dog Colby can be at times, and we certainly always reference the first Usman fight, what kind of striking success does Colby even have anymore? This version of him, right? I mean, he'll slow Buckley at times, but it's Buckley's chance. It's his moment. It's his opportunity. The responsibility is on him to, be the fighter with the bigger weapons and threaten with those and use those. And I think this could be his breakout moment.
Talking about moments and talking about the biggest moments of 2024, when you look back on the year, there's been a lot that's happened, a lot of big moments. What's the one that you feel like will stand out in 5 to 10 years' time?
Crazy to say it because Max Holloway just got knocked out by Ilia Topuria in such a huge, current champion against former champion sort of crossroads fight. But UFC 300, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. As much as it reminds me in a way of Pacquiao Marquez 4, only in this sense, right? This fight, we only talk about, people only reference the incredible knockout when Marquez in the 4th meeting with his fellow Hall of Fame legend Pacquiao finally got a win, knocked him out cold. But what was crazy was leading up to that knockout, it was arguably already the best fight of a rivalry that, from a boxing standpoint, is probably the best rivalry we've seen in this modern era. So you can't just frame what happened over 5 rounds in April at UFC 300 to the knockout, which was absolutely storyline perfect. You have to talk about the fight. You have to talk about, and remember, coming in, we were legitimately scared for Max, right? We were sort of
Mhm.
like, okay, his featherweight prime might be behind him, even though he's still young age wise, mileage, he's already up there. And to go in there against a killer who looked refurbished coming in, we also forget that about Justin Gaethje. He had head kicked to Poirier in their BMF rematch, and to see Max navigate those shark infested waters and then finish it in as storybook and as Max a fashion, because that's his calling card. That's his
Mm.
move. I was
Yeah.
there at 199 in LA when he did that to Ricardo Lamas, and the Inglewood crowd went berserk. For him to deliver that and then deliver that, it took a fighter that's already a legend, already a first ballot Hall of Famer, already one of the most beloved fighters of this generation, and almost gave him a second chapter to the new fans that are pouring in left and right in this era. Refurbished him to the point where there was a time where, like, is Max going to fight for the BMF title, the lightweight title, the featherweight title?
Mm.
To his credit, he put it all on the line against Topuria and actually fought very well until that knockout. So as much as I could say the moment of the year might be a debate between Topuria's knockout of Volk or Topuria's knockout of Max, the
Mm.
real moment of the year for me is just to see a beloved fighter do something that we thought wasn't possible and do it. I mean, not wasn't possible. It wasn't as if nobody was picking him to win, but with him moving back up to 55, we had concerns. And another thing that's forgotten in that fight is he landed that perfect shot on Gaethje at the end of round one, which really seemed to turn the
Mm.
tide of the fight and really put Gaethje behind the eight ball and trying to catch up with the blood, with everything there. So,
Mm.
sometimes it is luck or just the perfect strike at the right time. But I don't think we have that moment at the end of round five if Max didn't hurt Gaethje and put him on the
Yeah,
ropes
that's a good
earlier in
point.
that fight. But it all matters in the end. It was all part of that incredible story. And 300, it really was a memorable night, even if if I heavily criticized the handling of UFC
Mm.
coming in terms of not seeming like they had a plan for the main event, co-main event, didn't have a plan to make it this big splash. For all of us that said that fight week that, you know what, Max versus Gaethje probably should be the main event, they acted like main eventers, and that moment will be on that reel. If you're ever been lucky enough to be in the arena at a UFC pay-per-view, when before the start of the main card, they show that great video montage to the
Way
tune
the
of
who.
the Who's Baba O'Reilly, and
Mm.
it used to have this crescendo that it builds up to in terms of like the highlights get better and better right before that big break at the end of the
Mm.
song, and you can see Matt Hughes carrying Frank Trigg in their rematch on his
Yep.
back and slamming him. You could see Holly Holm landing the head kick. I think this Max knockout with the pointing and the timing, it's sort of, in the argument, crazy enough, in the argument for like greatest, most viral
Mm.
moment in UFC history. And we just saw it. So
Mm.
yeah, that's my moment of the year, Mike, no doubt.
I'm happy with your answer there, Brian, because I'm not sure if you know this, but I was actually there. Um, and every time people talk about
Forgot
that,
about that.
every time people talk about that, I'm reminded of how special a moment that I saw. Not
Okay,
only,
you
not
tell me,
only,
Mike. Tell me what it was like, please.
um, the only way I can describe it is surreal. Like it, I remember the story you mentioned. It's interesting you mentioned Pacquiao Marquez because there's the story about Manny Pacquiao's wife thinking that he was in a
Yes.
real bad way after that fight, and that was the kind of first. I was actually sat in the friends and family section behind both Justin Gaethje's and Max Holloway's family. For
Wow.
some reason, I've never told the story on camera. For some reason, they were sat together, and I look behind me, and there's a girl of about 10 years of age with a my favorite uncle t-shirt and with a picture of Justin Gaethje. So it
Oh,
was it was met with the left side of my ear hearing elation from Max Holloway's family, and the right side of my ear hearing these wails from the Justin Gaethje
what a
family.
vantage point, Mike. You could see
Yeah,
the agony of defeat, the glory of
exactly,
such a moment. Oh,
exactly,
wow.
exactly. Incredible, incredible.
Hey, one day you'll have a chapter in your book about that, okay?
100%. Talking about fighter of the year. Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria will obviously get those plaudits as they probably should. I like to do something a little bit different, which is an alternate fighter of the year. So if we take things out of the title picture for just a second, who is somebody who maybe was in the top 15, who's maybe got to a top 5 ranking or so on and so forth, who you look at and go, they've had a fantastic year and set themselves up
Yeah, yeah,
for
good
getting
timing
fifth.
because we are just sort of going through this in my day job at CBS Sports with us combat writers and editors
Mm,
debating, going back and forth, in terms of the top five in a lot of these categories. And I think the non-champion in the fight of the year balloting who deserves the most respect, in my opinion, might be Carlos Prates for getting 3 wins,
mm,
all by knockout. The last two were just sort of like his momentum of the personality of who he is. MMA's answer in a sense to the great boxer Ricardo Mayorga, the crazy man, the
mm,
former unified welterweight world champion who would, brazenly smoke cigarettes, drink beer, make fun of
mm,
people's, wives and mothers at a level. Carlos Prates isn't exactly that, but
mm.
what he is genuine and dangerous. And to see him have one of these 3 victories all by knockout, where coming in, probably a good amount of UFC fans who know the name don't remember him, but coming out of the year, you know his name now. You know him as sort of a, overnight title contender if a year can last overnight in our mind. But that was such a breakout campaign for him that it's hard not to keep him around, whether you have him at number 4, number 5, wherever it falls in your how people deem these. But yeah, the debate for Taporia and Pereira is as close as a debate I can remember, probably since 2019 with Adesanya and Masvidal.
Mm.
And I really feel like you could argue either way very proficiently. But
Mm.
shout out to those that are still climbing, that are making noise just the same. And Pratesh was one of them.
It's very much a almost quality versus quantity debate in terms of 3 world title
Yes.
defenses for Pereira, 2 more high quality title defenses for
Well, and you
Topuria.
got to
That's the
add in the
basic equation.
asterisk of Pereira doing 3 title defenses in 175 days.
Mm.
And I think you have to add in the MVP candidate quality that he was to the promotion. Not like fans debate that or care about that, but when you consider that counting September of 2000, or I'm sorry, November of 2023, it was like 3 straight appearances for Pereira where he filled in for the main event on
Yeah.
late notice, elevated the event by knocking out a former champion, or in
Mm.
Roundtree's case, a hungry contender who surprised us in the early going. It was an incredible campaign. Seriously, I feel like the 2019 Adesanya had in losing the fight of the year ballot in most ballots to Masvidal, although I still seem to be fighting the battle for Izzy. I felt like at the time, man, I don't think you can have a year better than that and not win fighter of the
Mm.
year. Well, tell that to Alex Pereira if he doesn't win it. And I know a lot of outlets haven't put out their award yet.
Mm.
And like we said, it could be Ilya, it could be Alex, whatever you prefer. But it's not just 3 wins against 2 in my eyes, even though I think you're right. The quality of competition does sort of lean Ilya's way
Mm.
aggressively. Let's not overlook the impact. Again, 175 days, and it wasn't like he was healthy. Can we not remember the fact that Pereira busted a toe in his first fight, entered the
Mm.
second fight having hurt the other toe, filled in
Yeah.
for Conor McGregor, who pulled out with a toe injury? I
Yeah.
mean, and then the injuries and illnesses he revealed after the Roundtree win. You want to say built differently? You want to use a hipster catchphrase, Mike? That dude's built differently. So whether he wins it or not, heck of a year for Poatan.
Yeah, 100%. Talking about very quickly, looking ahead to the new year, UFC 311 has obviously been announced. Islam Makhachev versus Arman Sarukian, probably the best fight you can make in the lightweight division, certainly in the lightweight division, one of the best fights you can make in the UFC right now. But that co-main event between Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov, I guess the question I want to ask you is, what are you anticipating from the build-up? Because it's already got spicy, it's already got
I
fiery.
know.
We have 2 interesting personalities and an interesting style clash of
We
personalities. What are you
we do,
anticipating?
and obviously with Umar Nurmagomedov, you get the celebrity circle around him of Islam Makhachev and Habib, his cousin. But look, I'm a little shocked. I'm a little shocked at, for as great of a year as Marab had. You want to talk about a
Yeah.
guy who belongs, in my opinion, in the top 3 of fighter of the year discussion for winning the title. On that platform against that level of opponent, and by the way, also defeating Henry Cejudo before
Exactly.
that, which is
Yes.
no picnic. Um, his winning of that title felt like almost the start of a new era. And just fast forward a couple months later, and we get Marab being, I think, correctly criticized for what seemed like he was ducking Umar. I get the
Mm.
stance he had, and it's not that it's an illegitimate stance. Has Umar done enough to cut the line like he has. You can argue no, for sure. I mean, the guy was ranked number 13 at bantamweight, seems like just a few minutes ago, although we take nothing away from that breakthrough victory, which truly put him in this spot. But even if Merab's right, how do you go from a year like that, the high point of being at the Sphere, feeling like you're starting a new era, and people are like, holy crap, like the uncrowned champion finally got his chance and he broke through. And then you get him legitimately acting like he didn't want to fight Umar, and then almost like this jealous ex-lover spat. I'm not trying to be, idiotic or spicy and infer anything. I'm just saying the way that Merab acted in the backstage thing they had before that press conference, at that press conference last week in Vegas, it was very much like an emotion pulled from him deep within that I didn't think would be there for a guy that's always so easygoing and almost goofy. It really sounded like, not that he's scared. Look, he signed the dotted line. He's a fighter through and through. That guy ain't scared of anything. But he recognizes, and I think that's why he's playing up so much, that he doesn't believe Umar should be here. He recognizes that Umar is Nurmagomedov, that he's a complete fighter, that he is taken that title from Merab of being, quote unquote, the uncrowned champion, meaning people believe you're good enough. We're just waiting for you to get that opportunity. This is such a hardcore fight fans, dream. I cannot wait for this fight. But I do wonder, if anything, what all of this emotion from Merab will mean on fight night. It's interesting. It's interesting to see him go in the sports deepest division, one that's filled with celebrity names, and he got through two of the biggest in Cejudo and O'Malley, and now he's an underdog, right? Against somebody who's got one win on the elite level, but he's got a great last name. He's got the best team around him. So we're going to find out come UFC 311, but interesting stuff. I mean, we're not going to dunk on Merab, but Mike, you got to be surprised he's acting this way, right? It doesn't seem characteristic of him.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't seem. Had the pleasure of meeting Merab a couple of times, and he has a lot of energy, but it's all very positive and it's all very upbeat, and it's all good stuff. So to see him make excuses is the bit that surprises me. Having also heard a lot of the things about the training room and Syndicate MMA and the nightmare that he is on the mat on sparring day, it surprises me that Merab would not necessarily duck an opponent, but duck a challenge. That's the bit that strikes me.
I'm with you, man. But I'm glad they got it in before Ramadan, and they just took a card that already on paper is pretty damn good and is now overflowing with greatness. So let's go come January 18th.
Very last question before I let you go, and apologies if I have to end on a sour note, but I feel like I have to ask this question. The question should be, do you expect Conor McGregor to fight in 2025? I suppose the question I'd like to frame it as, should Conor McGregor be allowed to fight in 2025?
Yeah, the question of should is very interesting, but I think UFC has already made this bed a long time ago. Really, with Conor and the build to Khabib and the biggest fight of all time, and basically setting a precedent that if you screw up royally outside the cage, short of something that is unforgivable, you can't take back. And I think to a lot of people, the allegations against him and the fact that he was proven wrong in a civil court, I guess, should escalate it above that line. But for UFC's purposes, and you hear Dana say it all the time, let the legal system handle it. Remember when Conor threw the dolly through the window and then they said, Dana, you're going to punish him, right? Don't forget, it wasn't just, Khabib went after. He got glass in the eye of a fighter. A couple other fighters were distressed emotionally from that situation. And Dana said, no, he's already paid enough in legal fees. He paid his penalty. So look, that's the establishment from the company. And as much as it's disappointing, it's not surprising. When Dana White a year ago slapped his wife on New Year's Eve, you couldn't even get a press release out of, the parent companies in that regard. So should he fight? I'm going to be honest. It's almost a non-question because it's not going to matter, but will he fight? I think he will. And I actually think the fallout of this trial and the astonishingly bad PR that he's received, rightfully so, from it. Obviously, there's some contention of his guilt, and him and a lot of people publicly are backing, there's some holes in the case. It wasn't a perfect case, but the judgment was delivered. And I think all this negativity will drive him even quicker to, quote unquote, get his ish together. Now, will that mean we will see a McGregor of old? I don't see how you could, when it seems like this guy's been partying nonstop for about 2.5 years straight. And we hear the rumors about him pulling out of the International Fight Week card, this year. And the idea of could he push through? Well, yeah, the Conor of 2015 and 16 would have, without question. So we're already at an older, inactive, recovering from serious injury McGregor, who seems to be living the life of an 80s rock star on the regular. I've got really bad visions of what his future in a cage looks like, but do I think he'll come back even to just, I mean, let's not forget when he came back against Cowboy Cerrone, which was a comeback fight, a couple years after he lost to Khabib.
Yep.
A lot of that was about brand rehab, about presenting Conor as the family man, the reformed man, at a time where those allegations were swirling of what ultimately led him to court. I think that this is going to be his way of coming back and feeling good again, getting cheers again from the people that will still show loyalty and cheer for him. But I do think you're going to see nothing but demonstrative diminished returns from him in the cage moving forward. And, if he goes in there and loses badly, I don't know if you see him again. That's the thing, right? And and when he does come back, there obviously will be a firestorm of bad PR attacking him. Reporters will obviously be looking to ask key questions. It's not going to be easy for him. People are not going to roll out the red carpet and just say, oh, those are allegations or what have you. It's a different time in his story. But I think it may lead to him even more needing the spotlight again, wanting it and wanting to come back to being, in theory, that disciplined warrior that he once was, that got him to the point of where he did, where he took over the sport and, in some ways changed it for good. But that guy's not walking through that door anymore. That guy's gone, and he's long gone. And Mike, it took me a long time to come to terms with that, because we all sort of hope, whether we actually like Conor or not, what we all fell in love with if we were a fan or a journalist during his rise was that magnetic effect of goodness that he brought to the sport, energy, excitement, money, opportunities for him, for the UFC, for all of us. But that guy's not here anymore. And I think that impact, which could be resurrected, like when he came back against Cowboy and it was like, man, he's back. Everyone cares again. When he came back that second time against Dustin for their second fight, it was like, people care again. He's back. We just want him back. You're going to find at least half the audience saying, no, we don't want him back. And how much worse can that get for Conor if he doesn't start, I think, actively making very necessary changes to his life?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think that's the best place for us to end. Brian, thank you as always for the time. We've covered past, we've covered present, and we've covered a little bit of future. So I always appreciate your time, yours and Luke's time, and thank you as always. Much appreciated.
Mike, thank you. And by the way, who had a great 2024? Mike Owens Media did, okay? Congratulations on all your success. It's only the beginning, Mike, okay? So keep fighting.
Much appreciated, Brian.